ellos, before they would get, they would lose all the leaves, almost all
In
the
the
leaves
winter?
in the wintertime. But since I put that up there,
It's happy now.
it's keeping them very healthy
Oh, good.
through the winter.
Yeah, my plants are pretty happy, but I could use one like that. I'll
Yeah.
probably need one like that in the studio, unless I have windows with lots of light.
Oh, the place you're gonna rent? Cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. So
Hi.
I was actually capturing you guys having a normal conversation, which seems kind of crazy after reading the book that you know your father has written, and it seems like it's effortless. So we're just gonna respond in whichever way. I just wanted to help the audience connect and learn a little more about your relationship, how the book came about, and then how you guys got to today from where you were before. So if you can tell me, Tatiana, how was your relationship, if at all, before when your father was sick?
So I was always a daddy's girl since I was a little girl. I loved daddy. So he was sick before I was born. So that was going on much, before I came in the picture. And then there were times when I was little, I know he would get clean and, I would get to know him or see him. And even I couldn't tell the difference really when I was little, although I do have memories of like him falling asleep or, me playing on him and trying to like open his eyes, like I have memories of that. And of course, when you get older, you realize what that is, like he wasn't playing with me. He really couldn't open his eyes, but yeah, when I was a little girl, I idolized him. He was fun. When he was around, he was a ball of fun, like a ball of energy. But there were also times like I knew that the energy in the house was like, just be quiet, or, my mom would set the tone like, no joda, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because and you could feel that shift. And then, the other times it would be like, yay, daddy's home, So it was like one or the other. And of course, my mom lived in an entirely different world than I did. She, was living in fear or living in like, what's going to happen now, So I can remember like just moments when I was little coming home from school and like he was who I wanted to see. Like it was like, where's daddy? Where's puppy? And then I remember very young too, because I have a very strong memory of that age, that if he wasn't there, I would get upset with my mom because I would feel like it was her fault. So even as young as like kindergarten, I would get home, would look for him, and if he wasn't there, it was because of her. So I remember that young, that it was, there was a strain with me and my mom because of maybe things that I had seen go on with them. Like I have a particular memory that I was about maybe 3 or 4, and she had to call the police on him. He had to leave the house. So it was, we all woke up out of our sleep. I was sleeping and I woke up. The police were there and they making him leave, and he's crying and he's begging to stay. And, as a little girl, I'm like, let him stay, and I remember that. I wanted to be on his side, I didn't know what my mom was going through, so it was a lot.
Wow.
And then I remember him coming back after the police left, and tapping on the window, and my mom, she would just open the window and give him $20 and tell him just go away, She would just say, just go.
Wow.
So I remember that so vividly,
Right. So when you reconcile what you thought was happening with your mom rejecting him or not being there for your dad, to recognizing she's protecting me or she's protecting herself, like at what age do you think you realized, wow, he was the problem, or the way he was, it was a problem?
So it was about the age that he was getting ready to change his life, actually. So, it was gradual. It went from missing, of course, you miss the absent parent. And then I got to a certain age where, thank you. I got to a certain age where I just was disconnected. It was like a disconnect. Like I wasn't like, Daddy, that was, that passes when you want that so much, and then, so I'd say around 12, 13, even like right before preteen, I started disconnecting because I wasn't so little anymore. I could go to Puerto Rico. My grandmother had passed away actually at 13, right around when I was 13 years old or 12.
Right, 13.
So she was the one who took care of me when I went to visit him because he couldn't take care of me really. He could be there, but then not, so it was, my grandmother was the caretaker. And after she passed, my connection with where he was, it kind of dissipated, So that was when I started kind of even maybe developing anger. Like that's where that kind of, and then I went into my own wild child mode. So by the time he started entering phases of sobriety, taking those steps, I was entering rebellion. And so when he came back at that time, it was laughable if he tried to parent me for me at that point.
Why were you angry?
A lot of things happened to me, not to say they were his fault, but the course that my life took left me really vulnerable. And I was just starting to realize those things that had happened. And so it kind of tied in with him, like almost like you weren't even there to protect me,
Right.
And that was the age I started realizing those things were wrong, and and I also lost control of myself. As a teenager, I was very wild. I was promiscuous. I was doing lots of drugs.
Were you hurting? You think now looking back, do you think that was just you dealing with your hurt?
To be honest with you, I think it could be so many things. I think genetically I'm so much like my father. I would spend summers with him, but I, am so much like him. My facial expression, mueca, the way I joke, the way that I am, the way that I sing. So much of me is him. So I think that even genetically I'm predisposed to addictive behaviors. So that was in me. I remember being a little girl watching him smoke cigarettes and think to myself, like, I'm gonna try that. And it wasn't, most little kids are like, ew, and I'd be like, on the other end, and I would say to him, what would you do if I picked that up and smoked it? And he's like, I would smack you, And then of course I wouldn't, but I couldn't wait to get that moment. Like it was like, something that, I don't know, it was like I was following his path indirectly. And it's funny because up to that point, I just hated smoke. Like I would tell anyone who smoked, don't smoke. Or maybe I remember I made you quit.
Yeah.
Like I made him quit at that, pre-teen age, like, and then I picked it up somewhere, so it was like, I don't know. Yeah, it was a combo of things. It was my anger, my rage, my realization, vulnerability I had, being hurt, being left, things like that. So when he came back, he had no idea what was going on. He thought he left like a little girl still, and I was far from that for sure by the time you came back.
Wow. So Ruben, I could tell that you were getting emotional when you were hearing Tatiana speak. What was going through your mind when you heard her kind of go back to those years, to that season of her life?
Well, for one thing, it's like sometimes we don't understand how much damage we're doing to the ones around us when we're in the midst of the chaos. The drug addiction, the behavior. Because everything that she has said, it's right on point. She didn't skip a bit on it. I as she was going around, she was going on about me knocking on the window. I could see myself doing that because I did that many times. You know what I'm saying? And so she just walked me through a path of my life that was very undesirable for anybody, and at that particular time I couldn't tell. I was completely oblivious of what was how much hurt I was causing them, her mom, because I was just talking on a meeting a couple of days ago, and I was expressing this, is that whenever there's an addict in the nucleus of a family, so what that does is like, it's like that old saying, that the butterfly effect thing, that if a butterfly takes flight in California, it affects the climate in China, and that has, that's very profound, because just one addict will disrupt the whole neighborhood completely.
Wow.
And that's a fact, because one addict will make, for example, in my case, my mother used to suffer, like she suffered so deeply, because she would find syringes in las gavetas, in the drawers, and she knew that something really, really bad was happening with me, and so in turn, her suffering is being watched by her other siblings, and now they're suffering the suffering of the mom, and then the other thing is that it's very hard to really grasp what's going on inside the addict's mind. Why won't he stop?
Right.
And they wanted me to stop so that my mother could stop hurting.
Right. So it's not even about you almost.
It turns into like
it's a tsunami.
it's such a big thing. It's like, we need to heal everyone from this, but then you pick sometimes, like sometimes the addict is ridiculed, and you pick who you want to save from the situation because you're so tired of that, what they're causing. You almost build up a resentment, right? So it's like, you don't even see their problem. You see what they're causing, and you just want them away. Some people, and that's why I think it's so hard for people to come to a point of healing, because they feel that they just want me gone, and then that just makes them revert back to their own, and it's just this cycle of viciousness, and I could see even points where you could go into like, I'm worthless because nobody wants me around because I'm a piece of shit, you know what I mean? And it's then you can wallow in that, and that's where addicts, and people with addiction and depression and things like that, that's where they go. They'll just sink into that, and it's, nobody can pull them out of that. Nobody, so
it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're not worthy, but then you already feel that way. People are telling you that, and then you do things that make you not worthy.
Right.
Correct. And
it's like a self-sabotage. You don't want it, people, like, ultimately everybody wants to be loved, and obviously addicts, they need that too. But they get to the point where it's like, I feel like, you're so unloving of yourself because you're causing yourself all, you're killing yourself, right? So then it's hard for other people to love you, and it's just, it goes like that with anything, but in particular addiction, it's...
And one thing is that, again, it's like a tsunami, because now the mother hurts, the siblings hurt, the siblings of the siblings are hurting, and when they go to school, they already disrupt. So these kids, they become, I don't want to use the term bad students, but they have these things behind their mind about when they go back home, they're going to find their mom sad or their father sad. They're going to be talking about what's going on with their brother Ruben. Okay, and like she told me, she mentioned one thing one day that really touched me, because when she was a little girl, they used see my family, and many families, I believe, for that case, for that matter, but in my family there's been a kind of like a law of silence that was implanted way back then. Like my father was a passive man, and my mother, so there were certain things that were not discussed. Many things, most things were not discussed. So things used to be just kind of like brushed under the rug, and but there were times that she told me one day that there were many times where the family was so concerned about my well-being and what their well-being, for that matter, because because I was out of control, you know, and they were so concerned about my mother's well-being that they will be discussing, you know, where he, you know, the things that were happening in my life, and you know, maybe she can tell me a little more about that, like, like maybe when they were probably talking, you know, just
like when I was young and I would eavesdrop.
and they
Is
were,
that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
So, you know, at a certain point in time, I realized something was wrong, right? Because my dad had to go away when I was in the first grade. Dad had to go back to Puerto Rico to try to get clean. So, you know, of course, I'm in the first grade, so I don't know what's going on. I just know Dad is there sometimes. Most of the time he's not, and most of the time he's not allowed inside the house. So I have to see my dad in the hallway if he wants to give me a birthday gift, something, you know. So I'm coming to understand something's wrong. Then I am told he has to go to Puerto Rico to get better, you know, so he's sick, so he can get better. So
Did you know what that meant? That he was sick?
No.
You did not think it was an addiction?
I didn't, because my comprehension of that was very limited at that time. By the time I did really ask questions, which was probably a few years after that, I was told that he was an alcoholic, like he drank too much. Like
that was
beer.
easier to,
Of
like,
course,
less
because
shameful.
beer is everywhere, and I see beer, and I see people drinking it. But if you're told like they did too much, you know, they are sick with that. So then I kind of got like, I've seen drunk people at that point. So that's the age you get the understanding where you see someone that's not quite there and they're out of it. So then I was like, oh, that's what his problem is, right? So then I actually found out he was a drug addict when I was about, actually it was, I want to say right before my grandmother passed away. So I was a preteen when I found out. And the way that I found out was my cousin, they were talking about my father, and they looked at me and they were like, yeah, because your dad's a drug addict. Yeah. So that's how I found out that he did drugs. And I had to like first, you know, reconfigure what does drug addict mean? Right. Like, because I think I was like in the, I don't remember what grade, but I know that like it just didn't click with me immediately, but I knew it was bad. I knew it was much worse than alcoholic. And you know, it was like a punch. And then I had to.
Did you ask or did you tell anyone?
I think I just pretended I knew what she was talking about. I was like, oh yeah, I know. And then I was like, I thought he was an alcoholic. And then I think I got upset with my mom. Because then because it was like, it's not that. And then I felt, you know, it's those moments when you're growing up where you feel like everybody's lying to you. Because I was pretty intelligent, but those were things that kids are not ready to hear, or it doesn't matter what way you tell them eventually. When it clicks with them, they're going to be angry or upset about it, or, you know, so that's how I found out. I specifically remember that. And then I had to go interview and ask my mom questions. And then, of course, your memory kicks in.
So then you put in 2 and 2 together. Your
memory kicks in, you know, you remember stories. So going back to what he was saying about me eavesdropping is that after I got the feeling and the notion that something was wrong, anytime my father was brought up, I was like a satellite, you know. Didn't matter what I was doing. They're talking about my dad, what's going on with that, right? So I remember they sent him to this program in Puerto Rico where collectively the family had put money toward it. Like it was like all right, this is like, we're gonna try one last time. And this was like the try. And I could tell because they were talking about the amount of money they had spent to put him through this program. And I remember thinking to myself, first of all, it was called Life Spring. So as a little girl, it was like, what is that? Like, he's going to Life Spring, you know? And then they were talking about how it's this program, he's going to be there for this long. And, you know, hopefully it's going to help him. Like, I just remember all the, you know, whoever was talking about it, maybe my mom was on the phone. I really don't remember the specifics, but I remember thinking, wow, this could be it. Like, Dad could be healthy now after this, right? And then kind of faded. Like, he didn't come, that was a few years later when he came here to get clean again, because he went to Puerto Rico when I was in first grade. Came back when I was 13 for the same thing. Like, it didn't work over there, and it was like, let's try again, you know. But one thing I will say that looking back, my family, although were quiet and hush hush and they wanted to solve it for my grandmother, my family, you know, wouldn't give up on him. So that was one thing that, like, I look back and I'm like, wow, he's lucky, because a lot of people don't have what he had.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people that are suffering the way that he suffered, the depths that he suffered. Like, I know stories about my dad, like, that I'm sure are in the book, you know.
Yeah.
But, like, to think of him in a basement, like, sitting in filth, you know, dirty, and just who he was, you know. There's so many people that live that, and they don't have anyone to pull them, you know. So my empathy for addicts is different.
It's almost like they're still people.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and not only are they still people, they're some of the best people from my experience. You know, they're some of the best because the way they hold and carry pain is unlike regular people. Like, regular people can't do what, you know what I mean? And I don't know, it's crazy. The amount that I've learned just from being a witness to it, just from experiencing it myself, you know, both ends of the spectrum. And
Yeah, and I, you know, like when we go back to this memories, you know, and stuff like that. And this is a story that I put in the book. Is she was probably about maybe like 2.5 years old. She was just starting to walk and find her way around the house, you know, and it was one of the times when I was allowed in the house, and her mother and I were sort of trying to make it happen again, you know, because it was an on-off relationship because of my behavior. Of course, she couldn't put up with it, you know. Like I would, you know, I was that tsunami in the midst of everything, you know, and I'm sitting on a couch watching TV, and I think it was like a Saturday morning or something like that, and her mother was in the kitchen, and I could see her mother, and I could see the hallway in front of me that led to our bedroom, and she had somehow managed to go over there by herself, you know. And like I was always like so disconnected from anything that was going on in the house, you know. All I most of the time what I had in my mind is like, you know, where am I going to go today and find like $20 so I can get myself a bag and shoot it up, you know, and get myself fixed. But all of a sudden I see her coming out of the room, and you know, she just learned how to walk, and she was very chubby too. She was like this, so she's kind of like just you know, walking along, and she has something on her hand, and then I realized that she had found my syringes inside my work boots that I used to sometimes, you know, get little jobs here and there. But I had this pair of boots, and that's where I hid them. And somehow, because little kids can find things that, you know, if you ever lose something,
daddy's. I mean, I wanted to play with it.
if you lose something and you can find it, you put a little kid and they'll find it for you, because they get into everything. So I looked, and I mean that day, like, it was like my heart just fell out of my, you know, just came out of my mouth, because I could see her mom, and I could see her, and she was walking to the living room with those things in her hands. And I bolted out of my chair, and I went over there and I took them away from her, and I, you know, put them away somewhere else. But then, you know, when that's the kind of craziness that an addict like me brings into it. Because I mean, I just want to go ahead and say, what if she would have taken the cap off? What if she would have taken the cap off and fell on it and pop her eye or anything? Mm-hmm. You know, and then those things that we do, that we regret, that cause so much pain and suffering, then that becomes we become we get so full of guilt that guilt contributes to our continue going back to mitigate the guilt, to mitigate the pain that we're causing, because we. You know, like we I'm not going to say that we're completely oblivious of the whole situation, but the illness is so deep, it's so deeply embedded in us that it overrules anything that we might think. Like I would be like, I would come out of jail sometimes clean and sober. Well, not sober because sobriety is a different thing, but clean body wise, physically. And while I was in jail, I would promise myself and I would promise my mom and everybody else, that once I came out, I was not gonna do it again. And then I would come out of jail, get me a little job, try to do the things that normal people do because, but I couldn't. I was not wired for that because I wanted everything so fast. Like, normal people go to work and then they put their little money away for a long period of time to get a clothes or to get cars or something. You know what I'm saying? No, I wanted it to have that like the first week that I went to work. Like I want to have that car. I want to have my clothes and I want to be normal. Right? So because that wouldn't happen, I would get depressed again because I was depressed all my life, literally. And the only way that I knew how to resolve that problem was to going back, picking up a couple of bags of heroin and shooting them in my arm. And then that would mitigate my pain, So
that'll mitigate any pain. I mean,
exactly, but so that pain that was within me continuously, that was the only way that I learned how to put a stop to it. But that's the kind of insanity that we'll put our families through, and that was only just one example of many. I remember one time because when I was in Puerto Rico, I went to Puerto Rico for like 9 years at one point, because I had done something pretty shameful here in the States, and I just wanted to run away from it, and then we sent her over there, and I remember one time that her mother had traveled to Puerto Rico with her, and her mother and I, again, we had this relationship, so we were seeing each other. Whenever she went to Puerto Rico, she would go and see me, and she even went to see me when I was incarcerated over there one time. But so I just wanted to do some drugs, and I didn't have any money. Well, and then I managed to get a couple of dollars, but I didn't have a ride, and we were very close to what I could pick up the drugs, but it was still within driving range. And her mother had a rental car, and I said, I was just conning it, so how am I going to con her into letting me use that car to go get a couple of bags of dope? And so I managed to inventé algo. I created a lie, and then I told her, Tatiana can come with me, because that kind of covers, like she can come with me. And she was, at this time, Tatiana was maybe 7.
that was his cover. But he's not doing anything bad.
Right.
It's fine.
Because we always try to, cover things up. So, and then she gave in. So I get in the car. We were in Juana Diaz, and now I got to travel to Ponce, which was only like 15 minutes. But the thing is that once you get to Ponce and you get to the place where they sell the drugs, you give the money to somebody, and then you got to wait, to one of the runners. And so I parked the car somewhere, and I had to walk through this alley.
Con ella.
Well, I left her in the car.
Oh my God.
Okay, and I walked into this alley. I want to say I walked 30 or 40 yards into this alley, but I'm keeping kind of like eye contact with her, right? And then I gave the money to the guy that was going to give me the drugs. And as I was looking to her in the car, I could see that she was going like this. And I knew what that meant because she always, when she had to go to the bathroom, she would get, like, I gotta go now, because she had like a little bladder problem back then, you know what I'm saying?
Just tell
And that's a very nice story that I got about this. I probably wouldn't want to talk about right now. But we had some of those. And then so now I know she's got to go to the bathroom. But I got to wait for this guy to bring me my drugs.
So now are you a dad or an addict? That comes that conflict.
Right. And I did not go to her. I waited and I waited and I waited. This guy, and then those at that time stops, and it's like tick, tick, because the anxiety that I have for getting my drugs just makes everything slows down. It seems like 5 minutes that guy is gone, it feels like a half hour, like an hour, you know. But those are the things that I still remember those things so vividly because they meant a lot to the human being that was inside of me. Because every addict has a human being inside of him, and that's what we gotta. That's the human being that's buried under all that garbage. Garbage is what has to be found.
See, and for me, like, I got to see that human because I knew that human without the addict. That human was my daddy, So I didn't hate him for that because I didn't know what that was. I knew who he was.
Him, like
right.
The essence.
Right, like the essence, like the fun and the guy who makes up silly songs and the guy who, just brought so much joy. Like, that's who I knew. So then you grow up and you find out, like, that's their vice. Like, this is what's wrong with that person. And you have to navigate that. You have to decide, are you going to be angry about that?
Right.
Are you going to, accept it, forgive them for what it is? Like, I don't know. I always say as adults that we have to forgive our parents no matter what.
Right.
Right? Because our parents are just human, right? So whether they did it right or wrong, they tried, you know? Or if they didn't try, whatever. They have their own set of human problems that were here before you were here, right? So, like, I always talk to people about that. No matter what problems you have with your parents, it's still that's still a person,
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the relationship that you guys have, because you guys are gonna go on a date, a father-daughter date, after we finish this. He gets clean.
Yeah, you're gonna buy me lunch.
Oh, okay.
He gets clean finally. Because in the book we noticed, I was telling him, listen, every time I'm reading, I'm like, okay, this is it. He really is gonna get clean.
Right.
And that happens so.
Me too.
The whole world.
Right.
It's like
he finally gets clean.
Yeah.
How do you get to this? How do you
Okay,
reconcile?
so let's just talk about where I was when he got clean. I was not in a place of acceptance for that. And then him and my mom tried to reconcile, and I was like, ugh, no. I had wanted that my whole life, imagine. But then it's happening, and I'm at that age where, and then he would, like, I'd come home and he'd be like, Tatiana, you have to, and I'd be like, okay, sure, because it just wasn't, we didn't have that. So I became, at that age, like, you owe me. And then my dad started, he was working, he was doing well for himself, and I became very entitled, and I became like, well, I want a phone. Well, I need $100. Well, I need, I want to go to this, so can you pay for it?
It's almost like payback.
Totally, and it was very like, not that I didn't love him, because I still was a daddy's girl, but it was like, I was very entitled, and then I was angry, so like that together is yucky. It develops like almost like a narcissistic type, like the world owes me, and I went through that, and that causes pain, like that causes suffering. So then I remember, like, specifically him being clean, and like my mom my mom forgave him. My mom is sweetie, like she, always had a soft space in her heart for him. And of course, when he got clean, he made his amends. Like he, took care of my mom, and everybody mended right around me, and I was still angry. So I remember even like being about like 18, 19, 20, like even those ages where he would come over my mom's house for dinner. My sister would be, everybody would be there, and I'd be like, this is weird, because I hadn't gotten out my part yet. Like I missed this part where we're all better now, right? So I think that goes for a lot of people that feel out of place in something, or they're still angry about, or they still have that pain about something, and then everyone else is carrying along. That makes you more angry. It's like, how dare you all just be normal, Right. So that was another hump that I had to go through by myself, because nobody really was aware of they would kind of just be like, what's wrong with her? You know what I mean? So I kind of lived on my own island with that. And my dad and I, we are so alike, and we can get like the way we're talking, we could do this for like 7 hours, you know. We could just go on, and people around us get tired, you know. They get tired and they're like, when do we get to talk, you know? Right? So him and I have always had that, you know. And then of course there were times where we disconnected and reconnected more, and you know, I'd be off doing my own thing or struggling or whatever. But then there are just times that we would connect and be really honest.
Like,
you know,
raw honest,
where I would tell him things that, you know, I don't tell people, you know, that are not easy to tell people, or things, even to things in relation to when he was not in my life, you know. Just anything and everything, right? You know, we've talked about everything, and I feel so close with him, and like I feel lucky, you know, that him and I can. And then there's been times where, like when I got pregnant, right? I was 16, so he was a couple years into his sobriety, because I was 13 when he started. So he's only a couple years in, and then I get pregnant. And then he was like upset that he didn't know right away. And I distanced myself from him. Of course, I just tried to disappear and let the earth swallow me. I didn't want to face him. And he came and found me at my boyfriend's house, because that's where I stayed. And he brought me like a card and I think like some flowers or something, and let me know that he loved me still, of course. Wow. And he loved my baby, you know. And then he was like a huge support for me while I was pregnant.
Wow.
And he loved my baby so much already, you know, before he came. And it was just, I'm just a lucky girl that I got a second chance with my daddy, you know.
Right.
He's my daddy.
Right. And it was his chance to kind of love you back.
For sure.
In a place where you probably were not proud, you were hurting.
Right.
It was his chance to say, I love you anyway.
Right. And then Jay came, and then everyone forgot about me, because it was all about Jay.
That's your son.
But, you know, he was actually like us, you know, part of the mending. You know, he was part of the mending. He brought so much joy, and my dad got a second chance to be, you know, around a baby and be present and not be lost and not be thinking about getting away, you know. So yeah, we were really lucky that we got that second round, you know. It's a blessing, and we're definitely very aware of that. So I feel like we're so lucky because we're so aware. And then, you know, there's times where we can revisit. Sometimes you have to revisit a wound and kind of just mend it a little and then come back, you know.
Right.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that she was touching on, and we talked a little bit about earlier, I guess I didn't finish, that is that, you know, that tsunami that happens, you know, and everybody gets a little sprinkle of that addict, you know what I'm saying, one way or another, because even the friends of the family, like the friends of my mother, would suffer seeing my mother so sad, you know. There's a part of the book that you know, I joined the service. You know, I went into the military running away from a case that I had pending of drug possession, and I was afraid that I was going to go to jail. And I was very young. I was 20 something years old, and when I entered the service, there was like, oh, he's going to get better there. You know, this time he's going to get better, because people go in the service and they learn discipline and this and that and whatever. So I sent my mother this picture of my Class A uniform, you know, and she took that picture and she put it right there in the living room where everybody could, right?
It's a good one.
Anybody that walked in that house had to be that picture. That was her pride and joy, you know.
She loved him because he was her baby.
Yeah,
he was the baby. And
then, you know, 4.5 years later, boom, I get caught selling drugs in the military, and I get, you know, a dishonorable discharge, a general court martial, and I get put in jail in the army. Wow. So now she has to, you know, like, I don't even, you know, I can't even imagine the pain that then now she felt looking at that picture, because that was no longer
a reminder now.
Right.
Shame.
Yeah, you know, and that shame that the family had, you know, gets engulfed with, is where everything becomes hush hush, because the families become ashamed of what the people are gonna say. What are they gonna say about? I got a drug addict as a son. They're gonna blame me for not teaching this kid how to be a proper, a normal individual, if you may, or many other things. That it's just that becomes. I put this as that becomes the jailhouse of the family. The be quiet, Esos son los barrotes,
It's like the monster in the basement. Like, we're all gonna sit here, like what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Carrying on, because obviously you have to carry on. You have to live life even when someone in the family is ill or suffering like that. Of course, if they're out, doing whatever, like in your case, family has to go on and you have to live. And then it's like that cloud comes back around, right? That cloud that isn't healed, and then you come and you reopen everyone's wounds and festering, and it's like, it's a healing process amongst everyone all together, and like, even like, I think of when you bring up abuelita, I think about her love for my dad, because I could see it, as a little girl, just looking, she would take specific times a day that we had to sit down and pray for him.
Wow.
And I would be like, why do I have to pray for him so much? But I would do it. My knees would hurt. And she, we would, every night, I would sit next to her, and, I was always by her side, and he was her, she was always doting on him and, worried about him. And now as I'm older, I realize that anxiety, it was for him, and.
Right. And the outlet, it's beautiful how she's like, I'm going to pray for this
Oh,
boy.
she would pray, tell other people to pray. Her faith was so strong, and that's another thing as a small child I felt. Because, she was just, her faith was palpable. It just came off of her,
So this is clearly very painful for you too. I can see you, I can feel it. The tears are coming from both ends. So why share this story? Why be so, you're coming from, you said, Ruben, that your family was very quiet. It was so hush, don't talk about the shame. But now you're the opposite. You went to the other extreme where you tell everybody and their brother, right?
Right.
So why are you sharing this story?
I'm sharing the story because I can see what I lived in the surroundings of my family. I see that every day with families. I guess it's probably embedded in our human nature to not be exposed when we are in a dark place. When we get depressed, the first thing that we tend to do is go in a room and in the darkness. We don't want to talk to anybody because we're just afraid to be seen like that. So, with that said, as I started my recovery through the program of Alcoholics and Narcotics Anonymous, and then I started sharing my story a little bit at a time, and I started feeling that, that wasn't too bad. I'm talking about some things that are really, really dark. Of course, I didn't start with the deepest things, but then I felt more comfortable. And they started telling me, the only way to heal is by sort of vomiting this. You have to give birth to this stuff. You have to expose it. You got to bring it out to the light so it dies. It's like a parasite that it lurks within the darkness of us, and it doesn't like the light. Once you bring it out, then the light kills it.
Wow, it's a purge.
Yeah. So I started doing that in my groups at first, and then I started feeling more comfortable. And as I spoke, I could feel literally the weight of these things, these sins, and all the damage that I've caused, just starting to shed off, and then I started doing the amendments, amending my things with her mom. And
what does that mean, amendments?
Okay,
for
so
others
that don't know.
All right, so I one of the things that is taught in the program is that at some point in your life, you're gonna have to try to go back. First we have to do an inventory of ourselves and start looking at to find out where our character defects emerge from, whether they were caused by somebody else. Maybe you were touched improperly as a little girl or a little boy, or you were beaten, you were, in her case, like I literally abandoned her, both emotionally and physically, and I'll be on and out, in and out, and that doesn't work. There's got to be a steadiness for a relationship, any relationship, to be able to be, built properly. So things happen in our past that manifest later on in our lives, and then those things become shame, and that shame is what made me the perfect candidate to become a heroin addict, because I tried many drugs during when I started it, acid, and like, Jesus, like I smoked pot, marijuana, for like 15 years, and I didn't even like marijuana, but I smoked it because everybody else was smoking it,
Wow.
But it used to make me paranoid most of the time, and I didn't like that. But there I was in a room and he was smoking like this here, and like, like, why am I doing this? And then I'll be like, because we used to get some good pot back then, man. And I heard there's some really nasty stuff out there today that if I smoked it, I'd probably just crawl under my bed and never come out again, right? God, I'm so lucky that I'm not out there now. But
So the amends.
so the amends is that so in the program it says, in order for us to start healing properly, we have to go back to these people that we damaged, and we have to sit with them and honestly ask for forgiveness.
Wow.
And those stories too, like of the folks that he did, I mean, there's a couple people that he actually, some that he ran into
Oh my goodness.
randomly in the street, and he remembered, oh, I like robbed your house, and then he would say, oh, I need to apologize, so some of those stories for me, witnessing him go through that, because it's got to be hard for anyone, but even more so, I think, a man to apologize, right, for something so like nasty that they did. And they might even, he did it in a way that it was like they might not even accept it, but I need to give it.
Right, because
so then hearing that, it helps me understand his process of healing. And it was like I got to witness someone heal that way, and so it taught me a lot just about, I don't know, it just taught me a lot about healing, right? Watching him, even shamefully go apologize, but then, he comes out so much shinier after every time. So through this 20 years, how long have you been clean out?
I'm working 21.
So he's working 20. So through those 20 years, I've seen him go through so many stages, so many, like, just, it's crazy that I got to witness that. It's crazy.
Yeah, and they have a saying, not only in the program of Alcoholics and Narcotics Anonymous, that about peeling an onion. It's just layers and layers, and it's an ongoing process. Like, I will be in this thing for the rest of my life, right. But then as you keep peeling layers of this, ball of, dirty things that are hidden within you, then you start seeing, you start feeling better, So going back to the question of why my story is because a lot of us just don't understand how important it is for us to start learning, not okay, let's send the guy to a detox recovery unit or something like that. That is part of it. But there's other phases that need to be taken in consideration, because we ramificate into so much, like we explode. Like I use my case, like I say that as I was growing up as a little boy, I got severed, I got broken, and then by the time I became an addict, I was like in pieces. I was like a broken puzzle, right? I was everywhere. And then I tried many drugs, but none of them drugs would put me back together. If any, a lot of them just spurs me more. Wow. But then when I came in contact with heroin, that summer of 1976, that one dose that I didn't even did willingly. It was given to me by some people, that I explained in the book. Is that day I felt that all the pieces just jumped back and boom, and made me a whole individual again.
But that was that true? Was that a lie from the drugs?
Well,
It was an illusion.
It
was how he felt when he was
It's an
high.
illusion, you know. But and that's why a lot of people don't understand, and they will say, well, yeah, well, he was a heroin or cocaine addict. I do alcohol. It's the same thing, you know. Everybody's fragmented, and then we search for that thing that is going to put us together in a substance that is the one it's going to be that substance that's going to do the trick. It's going to have the magic wand, because, like I've said many times, I met many people who are turning to heroin, and they would try it one time, and they'll be like, I'll see them like 2 or 3 days on the road, and they'll be like, man, don't ever give me that again, because they would puke, and they would not they didn't like it. I'll stay with my cocaine, they will say. And they'll go back. But they will love cocaine, so they will become cocaine addicts. Some of them will be alcoholics. I knew people who were alcoholics, used to hang with us, with the druggies, and all they would do was just do alcohol. And
Everyone has their vice, you know.
Yeah. So that's the reason why I tell the story, is because I know that, you know, I'm not the exception. You know, I was not supposed to be here today with my daughter. You know, if we do the numbers, I was supposed to be gone a long time ago. You know, but God, the fact that there was a program that was created, and then through that program I have learned certain steps that I know that they don't only work for me. You know what I'm saying? And although, like I say all the time, nobody's exempt of falling back, but there's a road, there's a certain steps that if you keep taking them, and you keep yourself and your mind clear, and you keep working the steps, recovery is totally possible. You know, and then things like this happen, you know, because I never thought that I was going to get her love back, you know, and it was a long road, and it's still a long road, you know. Sometimes, you know, things happen or whatever, you know. We don't have the perfect marriage here, you know what I'm saying? We don't have the perfect daughter to father relationship.
It's pretty good.
By no means, but yeah, you know, I'm happy with it, man, you know.
But it's because we can talk, though. Because,
Exactly.
you know, if I had a tiptoe around what I was feeling with my dad, or, you know, any feelings of not being able to be completely honest, it makes you just kind of not want to even confront anything, or it makes you be fake or talk about the weather or whatever.
Right.
You know,
Yep.
and to me, that I personally can't maintain relationships like that. There has to be some level of, you know, feeling, depth, emotional connection, honesty, and that was what allowed us to heal. So even like, I feel like in him writing this book, and in us being so candid and sharing what we've been through,
And it's and it's an ongoing process too, you know, and it takes time, and that's one of the things that, you know, like I remember that in one of the places in my book, I write like I don't remember when I became so impatient in my life, because I remember as a little boy I would sit there for hours and just look at that caterpillar inside the crystal bottle that I had it, right, when I was growing my butterflies. And I would just sit there. The caterpillar wasn't doing anything. It was just like standing on a leaf like that. And you know, at least do something. No, because he had already eaten. But I would sit there and just watch that creature. But then when I became of age, then I was so desperate. Again, you know, like if I started working a little job, I wanted to have the money to buy the car, to buy the this, the that. And I would envy all the other people who had all these things, and I would wonder, like, how do they do it? How could they wait like 9 months to put together enough money to buy a car? Like, that doesn't make any sense, you know? So the way that I would sort of repair that would be like, okay, I'll go to this guy that I know, and I'll ask him to front me like half an ounce of heroin, and I'll sell the heroin, and I'll make that money for my car like quickly like that. But the problem with me was that I was my best customer. So, you know, I would start like on the right foot, I guess, for like, I don't know, maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks. But then I start shooting, and then, you know, the money that I was making was not enough. And, you know, eventually I will end up having go back. I'll re-up. Like re-up means that I will sell that half ounce and go back with the money and say, give me another half, and do that, a few times until one day I didn't have the money. I was short. I couldn't go back to him and say, well, like I'm short $100. He'll be like, no, or he'll take the money minus $100, but he wouldn't give me any more. So, and that's when I would start robbing, like breaking into houses and doing the stuff that I did, because that's what I learned. That's how I learned to get my fix. But again, when I do the numbers, I know that something took place, and it was, and I always go back to what she was mentioning earlier. It was the prayer. It was my mother, not giving up, suffering. Like now I can. There's a picture of my mom that I have around here, and when I sit and I look at her eyes, I remember the pain that she suffered. But then, as I started working my recovery, and she started letting me, well, the first thing that I try to impose myself on her. That's when she started like, wait a minute. No, you don't, boy. Because you've been out of my life.
I don't think so.
No. Like you've been out of I'm 13 and you've been out of my life like what, 13 and a half probably? Like you've been
how about like right when Dad came back, right? I started smoking pot already. And I was very bold. Like I would smoke right in the house when my mom was at work, because my mom had a big house. So I could sneak into any room and she would never even notice. And then this one time I smoked, and then I must have been really stoned because I just left the roach, I went to go flush down the toilet, but then I left it in the bathroom on the window. So one day I came home from school, and this is like right when he just moved in. He's moved into my mom's house that I've been living, with my mom for forever without him. And I walk into the house and I see them both standing there. And I'm like, oh God, this looks like I'm in trouble or something. But I'm not used to this life. Like this is
two people,
two parents, and my mom is present. My mom is a working mom. She's always had to just keep going, but she is checked in right now at this moment, and he is checked in. And then I'm scared of my dad. Like, Dad is dad, and he's like, he's holding the roach, and I'm like, oh shit.
What's the roach?
A roach is, a marijuana cigarette. Like
the last part, little bitty part of the marijuana.
Right. So he's holding that, and I know, I'm like, damn, what did I do, And then I immediately go into this story about how it's my friends. And my friend, she's always smoking, and I just make this pity, and I feel she has to stop, And I am believing. I am believing my story, girl. I'm in it. I'm believing it at this point.
Yeah. You're committed.
This friend can never come around again because she has a problem. And they're both looking at me like, okay,
They
like,
bought it?
No, they're like, sure, and I'm just like, but I remember that, and I remember like that was the turning point, because like nothing really happened. Nothing happened. Like I just went about I just continued. I probably went upstairs and plotted on how I was going to get my next joint, because like at that point there was no, you shouldn't do, like I didn't have that in me. It was like, I'm going to do what I want, so
right.
It's just crazy how it flipped,
Right.
So when I was trying to impose myself on her, because one of the problems that we have when we start our recovery, and it's very common, it's almost like textbook, is that as soon as we put together like a month or 2 months or 3 months, it's like we want to lecture everybody on righteousness. You know what I'm saying? Oh no, and I I'm coming from a world of nothingness, not even know how to take care of myself. Now I want to impose myself on her and tell her how she had to live her life, and that's that. We started clashing, and that's when she started like. I remember one time I was driving her from Cambridge to Everett, where she lived, and I was lecturing her. I'm like, you know, you do this and you do that and blah, 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 and this and that. And I only had like a year or something like that of clean time on my belt. And we come to a spot, like a stop sign. It was dark. It was late at night. It was like 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. And she opened the door and she left.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, no, but yeah, and she just,
Que loquita.
yeah.
Couldn't take it.
I was like, I'm leaving now.
I'm done with this conversation. Boom. The only thing that I heard was the door. Boom, shut. And then, you know, she just disappeared into an alley. And I drove around, like, oh my God. You know, I was losing my mind because now I you know, like I had my hands tied behind my back and I couldn't find this girl. Well, I talked about that problem in my group with my sponsors, and they heard me and they gave me some feedback and says, okay, this is what you gotta do. First thing, you gotta be, you know, you gotta stop being so stupid, right? Because that's how they talk to us in the programs, some of the programs, because, you know, some of these programs, some of us, most of us, the majority of us, we have to hear it like right there and then, you know what I'm saying? We can't, we like to be treated with, you know, oh, you know, it's okay, you're gonna be all right, you know, just give it time. And that's not true.
No sugar.
That doesn't happen. So the people that I was running with in the program early in my recovery, they were like guerreros, like they were like on your face, you know, and they will tell you like it was. No, you know, no it's a bits of buts or whatever about it. So I told them, and they said, well, the first thing you're gonna do now is whenever you go to see your daughter, you're gonna park the car in front of the house, you're gonna say a prayer, and then you're gonna go upstairs, you're gonna shut up.
It's good
You're gonna say, hi, how you doing?
Sweet.
You know what I'm saying? But you're gonna shut up all those things that you get in your mind, all those thoughts that and laws and regulations that you never, you know, follow. Don't try to impose them on other people now. You know, learn how to just be around her and let her learn how to be around you. You know, and it was tough because, you know, she was in a dark place, you know, and you know, and then so like when she got pregnant, right? I was like I just lost my mind, like, oh my God, when her mother told me, because she told her mother not to tell me because she didn't want me to find out. It's, you know,
He'll never know.
right. He's never gonna know.
He's not
Boom,
gonna
boom, boom,
never
boom.
find out.
Right? And what's that you got in your hands? Is that the baby?
I don't
Oh,
know.
I see. When you found them. So, so when her mother told me, like within 20 seconds, 20 seconds, I said, oh my God, oh no. You know, like she's pregnant. She's only like 15, right?
I was 16.
16. Now she's gonna have that baby, and then when she's 17, she's gonna get pregnant again. She's gonna have another baby, and she's gonna have another baby. And by the time she's 24,
damn.
she's gonna have like 6 babies, and she's gonna be on welfare, and she's not gonna get a life. Oh my God, like Jesus, you know, like how am I gonna stop this?
This is
just
where I
wanna
get anxiety
fix
from.
this.
Now I know.
Yeah, you know, because you know, like I suffered from anxiety since I was a little boy. I was depressed since I was a little boy. All these things were, you know, the cornerstone of me becoming that addict that I became, you know. But by the grace of God, you know, then, you know, I started listening to the people in the program, you know, and I said, it was very hard, but I would just go and just see what her mother needed. Like, and I became aware that I never gave them anything. Mm-hmm. So I was making a little money now with the company that I work with still to this day. And I said, okay, hey, you know, do you need, you know, here, you know, I started, you know, and I don't say this to, you know, put myself on a pedestal. I say this because this is what we're supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. You know, even if it's late in life, it's never too late to contribute to something. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to fix the past, right. You know, but it will make the future a little easier for them. And
I'll say, like, from my perspective, watching him help my mom was like, wow. Like, I got to see my mom just, because my mom didn't need anyone's help ever. But seeing her have that extra, and then just, you know, at some point it just became effortless. You know, he was just doing what he was supposed to do without anyone telling him. And she had no expectations, so it was like a blessing. She had zero expectations at this point. I mean, I will say, being around an addict for as long as we have been, which is my whole life, it could be 10 years in and you're still like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It could be 10, you know, at this point we're a couple decades in, like we know dad is dad is here. But you know, with that kind of lifestyle, you're always on your toes with someone.
Right.
You never know what could trigger them. You never know if 2 years they had enough and now they want to go back. You know, you just, so with my mom, I know that she kind of would maintain that, but it was so nice to see her receive, you know, and
For
him
once.
yeah, and him be so generous, and it was just like, it was just, it's all been such a blessing to watch, you know, and with the good had to come the bad. So,
Right.
you know,
Right. So you guys, I don't know if you realized, of course I read the book, and one of the things that Ruben struggled with was not expressing his emotions and not being able to be open. And now we were joking that now he's going to the other
it's
end.
just flooding.
Right. And you kind of broke the cycle. The cycle of not speaking, the cycle of not sharing the quote unquote shame
For
and
sure.
sharing emotion. So as painful as, you know, that period was, it brought you guys to ending that cycle, and now you have this relationship, and now this book is gonna come out. And I asked you, are you ever afraid that people are gonna judge you? And now if you remember the answer, you said, everybody knows my business.
Right.
Yeah.
Not him for sure. Me neither though, you know, because life is life. Everybody has a different story. Everybody is, like people say, dealt a hand of cards. Some people's lives, you look at it from the outside, it looks so beautiful, so great. Some people's lives, you look at it, it's so sad. It's like, oh my God, how'd they make it through that? And everything in between. And this is just our story, you know, and I know that there's people out there that have had a parent addict, that have had a child addict. There's so many. I mean, there's everybody on this block, everybody in this, you know, has someone in their life that was touched by this, you know, and so I think that we're blessed to be able to share this story.
Right.
We're so lucky that we can share it, and we should, you know, because there might be other people out there like, why isn't this changing? Why is this such a generational thing? You know, why is my kid struggling with this now? Or I gave this to them, or, you know, and there's ways to break those things.
Right. So best case scenario, and I'll ask you first, Tatiana, and then if you can share, Ruben, that'll be great. Best case scenario, the book comes out on Mother's Day, whenever they watch this. What's your biggest wish? Somebody reads it. What kind of person reads the book? What happens in their lives after they read it?
I can only hope, you know, that someone who's in recovery or thinking about it, even if they're not quite there yet, you know, whether they come across the book on an audio and they listen to it or something grabs their attention, I can only hope that they feel it and they can relate to it in their own pain, in their own way, and see that there is another side. You know, there is hope. It's not all dark, you know, and that they too could live a life completely different from the one they have now, you know. So that's what I can only hope. And that even like children of an addict might read it and be like, wow, there's hope for me and my parents to have a relationship at any age, because it doesn't matter what age, you know, you can repair. We were lucky enough that I was still a kid when we started repairing, so we've had, you know, good 20 plus years of healing. You know, it's not been easy, and it's like a continuous thing. But I can only hope that people will see, like, I want that, you know,
Right.
and they can have that too.
Right. So for you, Ruben, as a recovering addict, what were you, best case scenario, the book comes out, one person picks it up, somebody tells them about it, what happens?
The miracle, you know, the realization of that individual or the parent of that individual that that recovery is possible. Right? That I'm not the exception. Right? I know many people who are recovering addicts right now. My sponsor is a recovering addict, and you know he's very involved in my recovery because it's a lifelong journey. But that not only an addict or an ex-addict who's struggling maybe after the fact that they're not using anymore, to find channels and to better our lives and the lives of the people around us, to heal, to heal the deep dark wounds that, like she was mentioning before, sometimes we revisit and now we even revisit some of them and we laugh at them, you know what I'm saying, because we have that ability now to do it because they've been sealed, they've been healed. So now we can just go back and open the bag and look at it and stuff like that. But we learn every time we go back to any one of these times of our lives. But it's just one person, comes in contact with that book, and that book sparks something inside of them that is going to take him to that next level. And even if I hear from them or not. That's my purpose, because there's a saying in the program that says, you can't keep it unless you give it away. And yeah, it's a book, it's I guess there's cost, to go through this and stuff like that, what happened. But the main idea of this is just to send it off, to send this butterfly that had one wing but now has two wings, and just send it off to whatever, as far as it can go. Because as far as you can go, you're gonna find people, and whatever there's people, they're addicts. And whatever they're addicts, there's the possibility of recovery.
That's powerful. So how's your life today? Like, somebody is reading this or watching this, and they kind of got a snapshot of what your life was before. So. Your life is like completely different. So what's your life today?
Okay, my life is not a bed of roses, but there's many flowers in there. And there's some thorns, here and there. But I've been learning how to deal with them without having to go back to drugging myself, which was not the case before. Like if I was dismissed by a girl that I like or something, like she would not pay attention to me, I would get hurt deeply, and I still get hurt if I approach somebody romantically and, they're like, no, I don't think so. You're not my type, buddy, so you just get away from me. So, but
he'll do the same thing to someone that approaches him that's not his type.
But yeah, because we got choices in life. Now I learned that we have choices, that we don't have to just do what, the first thing that comes into my mind, or that we got to be desperate, here and there, or whatever the case might be. So, with that said, my life, I enjoy my life. I live in this little room right here, my little apartment, and I have my grandson's picture over there, and I got the butterflies that everybody's sort of giving me because everybody's into this butterfly thing. Back there, I have a little machete that is, in memory of my mother. That's the machete that my mother used to cut little sticks with to roast coffee beans back in Puerto Rico when I was a little boy. I have her in my life. We're not like up each other's back all the time, right? But we maintain this relationship, and every time she sends me a text saying, "Hi, Dad, how you doing? I love you," that right there, it's enough. You know what I'm saying? That right there, it's the price. It's the price. It's knowing that I can get up at 4:00 in the morning, get on my truck, go to work, be exposed to the elements because I gotta work outside all the time, and know that if I want to buy me a big TV or something like that, I have to put money away. I'm not gonna go and get a couple of grams of cocaine and just sell them, try to make a quick buck or whatever. It's a totally different, glass that I see my life through now, and again, sometimes you see little stains here and there, and you can't see clearly, but that's when even I use her as sort of like a recovery counsel, because I confide with her many things, and I tell her things, and that brings me a lot of joy because, again, like a lot of people are missing out on this. A lot of people are walking around, with that bag in the back, they abandoned this little girl, and now they don't know how to sort of try to find their way back and just get back close enough to stand there and let the little girl see them, and then let them, have the little girl start approaching them so that a relationship can get created, and enjoy the life, enjoy the goodness that's out here to be tasted, the honey, the sweetness of the honey of recovery. So, by no means, living la vida loca, for, to put it in one way or something like that. But I am enjoying the hell out of it, and I praise God for that, and I praise, I like in this book, this 3 individuals that I mention over and over and over and over again, and I will continue mentioning the 3 individuals for the rest of my life, and it's her mother, and her sister, because these were the cornerstone. Literally, when I started seeing them, opening their hearts to me, even with all the pain and suffering that I caused them, I was like, wow. That brought me to a realization of like, wow, they because I never trusted anybody in my life, but now I could trust these individuals. Like, they really love me, and they don't love me because I'm going to bring some money there or whatever, they just tell me. They're not asking me for anything, and they are telling me that they love me, and, there's no greater reward than that.
Right. Powerful. So to wrap up, Tatiana, a child is watching this, and their parent is an active addict, and they have been disappointed time and time again. What would you tell that person now that you are on the other side?
Let's see. I guess when I was 13 and he came back, and he was trying to get clean, and I remember, I guess it's different, I guess it would be different at any age to accept that, right? So you'd have to be going through your own individual type of healing and forgiving before you can even, but I would say, look at your parent just like a human, like not like your parent. Like, abandon, the idea of what they're supposed to be to you, right? Just let that go for a second and look at them just as a person, because when you do that, it allows you to take yourself away, like what that responsibility to them, to you is, right? So it takes your own ego and expectations out of it, and just look at them like a person. What did this person go through? Why are they like this? Why, like in talking to my dad, I realized he was such a sensitive child, which I was too. Not all children are so sensitive. So when I hear the things that would hurt him as a child, I'm like, oh, that's why I like, it makes sense. And then you hear other people talk about what they go through, and it's not like that. They didn't see the world like that. They weren't so hurt by everything, or, so it's like, just look at the child in your parent. Look at your parent and look at them as a small child and feel for them. And that will help you gain some more, empathy with the situation, rather than harbor that anger and that kind of your own emotions about it, right? Because that's what keeps us in that pattern of not being able to forgive, because you're holding on to your anger. You're not, letting it go. So I feel like part of letting that go is looking at your parent and looking at that wounded child in them and forgiving them. Right. That's not easy. Like, it obviously sounds so great. It's very hard, but it's also something that allows you to step outside of your own hurt so that you can, process maybe a little bit of why, because we tend to think, addicts are selfish. They're so selfish. All they care about is, themselves. And it's not entirely the truth. That's not what addiction is. It's not a selfish disease. It's it's a plethora of things going on, So yeah, I would just say, educate yourself about addiction. I think that some kids that are even a product of that struggle with their own addiction problems. So it's almost like, really take a look at what you're doing, if you're gonna go the same route, or if you feel like, that's your answer too, because your parent did it or that's what you saw, you know. I think that just going inward, you know, and
Awesome, powerful. So I'll ask you this, at the risk of a reaction, but Ruben, what would you say to a mother or a father that has a child or children that are kind of deep in addiction? What would you say to them, knowing what your own mother and your father went through?
Well, my heart goes out to them, first of all. You know, I know the struggle that they're going through. You know, I know that they're, you know, there's a lot of like, you know, uncertainness, pain, you know, shame, and all these other things that are related to having an individual in our life, especially like a son or a daughter. You know, I think that's got to be even more painful. You know, that it's probably the hardest thing to do, but we have to hold on to something. Hold on to each other, first of all, because an addict can divide families. You know, an addict can make a father and a mother just get a divorce. You know, say, you know, like, I'm done with this. You know, like, because you treat him this way. You know, maybe the mother is treating the child one way and the father is not, or maybe the vice versa, and that would create, you know, big gaps in the marriage, and that would probably could, you know, turn into a disastrous marriage. So they first of all they got to unite and become one, as they should, and then again, like she said, you know, learn about addictions. You know, this groups that are out there, you know, like Al-Anon and groups like that are specifically designed not for the addict but for the family of the addict, so that you know, the families can become aware of how exactly the mind of an addict, you know, functions, and therefore they can attack the situation, or at least deal with the situations that he's going to bring upon them in a different way, you know, and therefore maintaining kind of like a stability, so that they can wait out the storm, you know, pray, you know, look for help, you know, and then another thing that I know that is that happens a lot is that we become enablers of the addict. Like, they need, because we become very, you know, really needy, and then we need. I need more money. I need more of this, you know, and we don't want to see them hurting, so we don't want to see them mad. We give them the money, we give them the car, we give them the this, we give them the that, because it's not only about being addicted to drugs per se. The individual could be addicted to a certain lifestyle, you know, and then when we cannot provide them with that lifestyle, they become angry, they become disoriented, they just break apart, you know, and so we have to learn how to walk that fine line of not becoming enablers, but not throwing the individual into the trash, and just, you know, severing the relationship completely, because that will end up even worse for the individual. Because she mentioned something earlier, it's like, and I said it too, it's like, still under all that layers of craziness that we have as addicts, there's still somebody in there reaching out, yelling and screaming for somebody to come and love them, you know. And if what we get is more rejection than love,
it's feeding the other monster.
It's gonna be pretty hard for that individual to react.
Powerful. So the book is dedicated to your mother.
Yes.
And unfortunately, she's not here to read it. But if you could, she's in heaven. We don't know how it works. I don't know how it works. But if you could tell her something, this Ruben that's on the other side of recovery with his family, high functioning in society, what would you tell, if you could, what would you tell your mom today?
You know, I've been talking to my mother for the past 20 years, almost on a daily basis, you know, because when when I started my recovery, I didn't have the opportunity to verbalize all the things that I can verbalize today. I was very young, very early in my recovery. I was still trying to, find my way around in my darkness without the drugs now. So, and then, like 5 months into my recovery, she passed on. But one thing that brings me, a lot of comfort is the fact that even though she prayed for all them decades, she saw the product. She had the opportunity to at least, see, her little boy that never grew up, like a Peter Pan sort of type of individual, finally, just, start standing on his own 2 feet, or at least, start crawling around. So I would tell my mom, like I wrote on a poem, that I'm not that individual anymore, that the Christ that she embedded in me, the faith that she embedded in me as a little boy was not in vain, that seed that she planted on me of being generous and of being, loving and caring, that I did not understood when she was trying to provide to me that loving and care, because I was, like she said, also, I was not aware. I didn't have the ability to receive that love, but she embedded it inside of me, and it stayed in there dormant. It hibernated inside of me for years and years and years, and then other people came around and they started, just watering that seed with their love, like her and her mom, and which I continuously go back to, and her sister, and now her sister's son, and which are my grandsons, and her son Jordan, who's my grandson also. So all these people have been watering that seed, and the seed that she planted has taken root, and I love Mom for that. I praise her. I talk about her all the time, because she never gave up on me. She never gave up. She was just there. And like, I remember times when I would come back from the streets, of being out in the streets for 6, 7, 8 days without taking a shower, and it was in the middle of the summertime, which is even worse, because then, you sweat, and, I had the same socks and the same underwear for 7 days, and I would come back to the house and knock on the door, because I was now exhausted. I couldn't run no more. And she would open the doors, she would open the door, and she would just look at me with the saddest eyes. But at the same time, I knew that in her heart, she would say like, oh, he's still alive. And then she would take me to a room and tell me to lay down and give me some underwear or something, and tell me to take a shower. And then I would just lay in that room for like 4 days straight, not being able to even get up, because I was so weak, and so desperate to, for drugs, but I could not get up anymore to go. I didn't have any more hustle in me. And she would come repeatedly into the room with like tea, or like, she would always make me oats, or she would make me little things just to try to give me comfort, and inside of me, in my mind, I would say like, that's not what I want right now. What I need is a bag of dope. That's what would make me feel better. But she didn't know that. She thought that with that cup of tea, she was gonna make me feel better. So, she never closed the doors of her heart on me, and that's I love my mom for that. Because she was remarkable woman. Her faith transcended anything that I've seen anywhere, and I know that faith, had to do, with my recovery, of me being enlightened at some point in my life, at the right time, I guess, because that's how it is too. It's not when we want it; it's when it has to happen. But she's an example to me, and I'm not the man that she had to pray for so long. I'm back.
Everyone, anyone in our family that you ask will say that she prayed him sober, because it was just a known thing that it was a part of her day, it was a part of her, regimen to pray for him.
Powerful. I want to thank you both for going down memory lane and
Thank you.
sharing your journey. I know that many more people will be blessed and will learn the underbelly of addiction and how to navigate and how to deal with their loved ones. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.